Well, good evening, everyone. I'm David Rubin, the Brown Foundation Curator of Contemporary Art here at SAMA, and welcome to our latest Artist Conversation. Tonight's program is sponsored by SAMA Contemporaries, so all of you who are members of SAMA Contemporaries, thank you so much. Now you know one of the things that your membership helps us accomplish. Also, if you're not a member, we have some great events coming up for SAMA Contemporaries. November 1st, we're doing a day trip to Austin, to an artist studio, 3 museums, and a major private collection, and a great lunch. In December, we're having a holiday party at Overland Partners down the street, and in January, we'll be doing a visit to Hare and Hound Press. So lots of great activities. We encourage you to join. But now the focus of our evening is going to be to celebrate the life and work of a really talented artist who lives and works right here in San Antonio. It's a real pleasure and privilege to introduce Lloyd Walsh.
Thank you, and thank you to everybody who came tonight. I'm very flattered.
So could we have the house lights down, please?
Oh, God.
Oh, my goodness. If there's any way of making those bright ones a little less bright, that'd be great. But we'll keep your eyes focused on here and on me, and then you'll be okay. Okay, that's better. Okay.
Wasn't I adorable back then?
we love to begin these conversations with a look at where you came from. First of all, where were you born, Lloyd?
I was born in Honolulu, Hawaii.
Move the mic closer. Yeah.
Honolulu, Hawaii.
Right. Okay.
Is that better?
And then, but then you were raised where?
Well, my father was he was in the Air Force, and he was a diplomat. He was in the Air Force attaché, and he happened to be stationed in Hawaii when I was born. Lucky for me, and although obviously I don't have very many memories of it, but we returned to Hawaii after leaving for a while, and then our next stop was Rangoon, Burma.
And how long did you live there?
I was there for 3.5 years. I grew up in Burma.
How old were you during that period?
Oh, good Lord! Oh, don't make me do math.
Roughly.
I think when I arrived, I must have been about 4.
Okay, so were some of these photos taken in Burma?
Yeah. Right, that one right there, the one in the middle bottom, the tea party that I'm kind of crashing right there. I'm that guy right there. And the funny thing is I'm wearing a Charlie Brown shirt, and to this day I still wear Charlie Brown shirts. But that was in Burma. The black and white one over there with the little airplane, that's Burma. I think.
And were you in any form of schooling yet?
Yes. Yeah. There was a school that they had. It was called the International School, and it was kind of a funny name because it had lots of students from Germany, I'm trying to remember some of the other countries that were represented, but they called it the International School, but everybody had to speak English.
Okay.
So, go
the
figure.
international language. Right?
Well, this was a country that was,
right.
a British colony, so I think a lot of that still existed over there. I think the photo where we're in the airplane, that's actually in Saigon. We made a stop on our way to Burma in Vietnam, and that must have been at about, I want to say 69. And I think that picture is me in Hawaii where I'm kind of jumping around in the waves. I think I grabbed something unpleasant, and I'm making a face that expresses such a disdain for whatever I picked up.
Had you had any introduction to art yet? To the arts?
No.
Anyway? No, not yet. Okay, what about this period in your life?
This one? Oh, okay. This is in college, and there we are playing on the river. I'm
And what did you say in college? Where were you?
I was probably about a sophomore in college, maybe junior. At UTSA.
At UTSA.
Yeah, this is on the San Antonio River. We were invited by a restaurant. We used to play on street level. We just used to show up and play our own music. And we all played acoustic instruments, so we would just show up and just kind of take over the street corner. And sort of drowned out the preachers, and it was us. We were on stage. And then one day, someone from a restaurant invited us to go stand in front of their restaurant on the Riverwalk. And within 5 minutes of playing, and a friend of mine taking these pictures, we were under arrest by the by the park rangers, and our charge was illegal river use, whatever that is. And so we all went to court and we dressed nice, and then the judge just rolled his eyes and dismissed the case. But there I am in my Spam T-shirt. I really like that shirt. I haven't seen that in a while.
So that's the second shirt that's important to you so far.
There's a lot of important shirts. Well, somebody was joking with me and saying, like, is every other shirt in your collection some type of novelty shirt? And I was like, yeah, probably.
So were you getting a degree in art? Is that what you were studying at this point?
I started in music, and then I switched to art.
While you were at UTSA?
While I was at UTSA.
And this was for your BA degree?
This was a BFA. I eventually finished a BFA.
BFA. And then where did you go for further education?
When I went to graduate school, I applied. Actually, my BFA at UTSA was in photography. And then I applied to go to graduate school. And when I got accepted into graduate school in Oakland at the California College of the Arts, is what they call it now. When I was going there, it was called California College of Arts and Crafts.
Correct.
I switched over to painting.
And you never stopped.
Yeah, true. And I never stopped photography either. And I definitely want to make a point about that.
Well, let's start looking at some of the works then. So this is one of your earlier paintings from the mid-'90s. You want to tell us about it?
Okay, yeah. This piece is I think this slide starts with pretty much the work I was doing after graduate school. When I came back to San Antonio, how do I start this? I was working with I had been working with a book that I found on my way to Oakland when I moved to Oakland. I stopped in to see a friend who was living in Provo, Utah. And it was this really great journey out there. I'd never gone on a road trip by myself, so this was the first time I kind of broke away. And one of the stops we made was in a used bookstore, and I found this book on, it was probably published in the 20s, and or 30s. It was a book on skin maladies. And it was this catalog of all these clinical black and white photographs that were beautifully photographed of people that had, really, really exaggerated skin diseases that had, those are the case for people who weren't getting treatment for them, and so the cases were really extreme. And it triggered something in me, mostly memory of growing up in Burma, because in Burma, at that time, it was not uncommon to come across somebody walking just down the street in front of your house who had leprosy, someone who had elephantiasis, and real exaggerations. I must have pushed all that back in my memory, because as soon as I saw that book and I opened it up, it was just like, wow, I suddenly had 2 years worth of material to work with in grad school that was about these memories. And you will see, I think later on in the show, slideshow, there's going to be more images that still speak to that. But I was trying to come out of that particular body of work. And this piece right here, I was trying to work with symbols that somehow or other were evocative of a sentiment or a feeling. And this is to me, it's a cherry put in somebody's ear, and it's sort of like whispering poetry into somebody's ear. It has this sweetness to it that blocks everything out except just the nice deliciousness.
Now, the audience will see as we go through that the majority of your works are untitled.
Yes.
Why is that?
I hate titling pieces. I don't know. Some people are really good at titles. I'm really bad at titling works, and I think that...
Yeah, you have titled some.
I have titled some, and you'll see a few in here in the show that are going to be titles, and they're very specific and pretty dry descriptions. But I've really had a problem with titles. I've gone and seen some work of other artists in museums, and I look at the titles, especially in 20th century, late 20th century work, that just makes me just like, there's something about it that just kills it. It's just like, God, I wish I didn't know that. I mean, we're visual artists. We're not, well, some people probably are poets. Some artists are good at math, and I'm not, but I'm not a wordsmith, and I don't want to lend something to my images that I don't feel would add anything to them, but would be a
well, I'm
deterrent.
also assuming that you like the open-endedness of the no title, and that the person looking at it perhaps they have a clean slate when they're looking at it, as opposed to something that's you've told them where where they should be thinking about.
Yeah. I think you phrased that better than I could have. It is. It's ambiguous. I like the ambiguous meaning, and I like putting associations together and inviting that interaction of what you perhaps could read into that from your own experience.
Well, let's look at some other examples.
Okay.
Tell us about these two then. They obviously seem to have some Old Master references going on.
Yeah, these two pieces, these are pretty small pieces. I would estimate the sizes are about, maybe about that big. And I was working on these pieces that were more about objects with paintings on them. And the painting started becoming a little bit of a decorative element on top of a decorative sculpture. But I carved these. And I think the one on the left is a little harder to see, but on the top there's sort of a pattern in there. And a lot of these things I was borrowing from were from folk art. And the image on the left is taken from a painting by Francisco de Zubran. And it's from the Veil of Veronica.
Right.
And it certainly has a reference to the way that it's folded is the way a particular order of monks would fold a cloth. And then Zubran, I think, was somehow associated with this order of monks. So he would study that. He would do images of that. Now, in the painting that he did of the Veil of Veronica, there's a miraculous apparition of the face of Christ on it, because Veronica wiped his face as he was on the road on Calvary, on the way to be crucified. But this also sort of borrows some of the references from the Passion. There's the dice, and then there's the three little blood marks that are up there that are references to wounds. The one on the right is called Purgatory. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry, and I didn't send you the title to that one. My bad.
So that one has a title.
Well, actually, there was a couple of paintings that I did that were based on the iconography of paintings that were titled Anima Sola. And anyone who speaks Latin, I'm sorry for butchering a very important language, but it's the soul in purgatory.
Yes.
And being purged with fire. And my association with fire and purgatory, and this is from growing up in San Antonio, of course, it's fire ants. So there's this hand that's kind of like, and this is from that book of skin maladies. And so I painted a few fire ants on them for good measure to really, drive the point home. Now, this one is from that book also. And this is probably one of the last paintings I did that referenced that book. And on here, I think that the original malady was vitiligo. And so I changed it a little bit and made it into something that looks sort of like a birthmark. But in it, you can see that the pattern that's created is of a cow's udder. And you can see that there's little droplets coming out. So this one is titled Miraculous Lactation. And this is sort of based on, I think I was, when I finished grad school, one of the things that I enjoyed talking about was, has anyone ever been to Papa Jim's? I can't even see anybody. I see silhouettes. But Papa Jim's is on the south side, and it's a Botanica. It's kind of like the central market of Botanicas. I think though now it's a pet store, a tropical fish place. But when I was at UTSA, one of my friends took me there for the first time, and so there was lots of iconography that was associated with that. Lots of little things that you could buy and hang up on your on the outside of your door. And so when I introduced this to my colleagues and my fellow students in Oakland, they were really fascinated with it. And I said, yeah, this is very rich. So I started kind of mixing some of that idea that, there's the miraculous apparition of, a face of Jesus when, somebody cuts down a tree or on a tortilla. So I was trying to extend that a little bit, and I said, well, what about a cow? And there is a painting I did with the Zubran. I think, did I see Joe Bravo in here earlier?
He's here.
There he is. Yeah, Joe has that one. That's the Zubran painting where it has it was a play off the Veil of Veronica. It's called the Dairy Maid's Veil, and it has the same type of lactation off this miraculous apparition of, appearance, whatever.
Okay. Now, this is a painting that Sama owns, and we own two of your works, so this one's in storage at the moment, but this is the earlier one, and I know you had a very specific iconography in mind for this one.
Yeah, this one is titled flesh to earth, and I think and this is really kind of the time that I would say I was still influenced by that book that I bought, but I was getting away from that, and I was starting to use my own references. I was starting to look for my own subject matter and work more from life, and instead of these kind of crummy black and white reproductions, and trying to do the best I could with them. And in this one, I really wanted this muted palette, and I think in here, this was like one of those major sort of transition phases for me, because if you see around the corner of the image, there's a decorative element that's sort of these sawtooth. And maybe that harkens back to my photography background, because on 4x5 film, you see those little indications. And I still was putting it in kind of this book format, like you open the book and these were the books that were presented on the page.
So did you do a series of diptychs?
I did, yeah. And this is one that just kind of represents that, just sort of two ideas of...
So tell us about now the meaning and the imagery, the rose and the woman.
Oh, good Lord. I'm bad at this, but I think
Yeah, but you had something in mind.
Yeah,
so,
I did, but...
In this case, we want to know.
Oh, okay. Rats. Well, I mean, as I was looking in here, I was trying to find something that both embodied life and all, sort of eros and pathos. And here, I think the rose is, becomes sort of an image of this life-giving force, but yet this is something that's presented in, roses can also be a sentiment for, sorrow. And I think the pose of the woman, who's very much alive, but also just the way she holds herself in that pose, kind of plays off that idea, sort of a riff off that idea.
Now, at this point, were you aware, since you had been in the Bay Area, of Jay DeFeo's The Rose? Did you know about that yet?
You'll have to remind me of that story. I think I do, but I don't want to.
Well, it's an enormous painting, that took her eight
That was the
years to
one
paint.
where
Yeah.
she kept painting and painting. They found it in her apartment after she died?
No. It was stored at the San Francisco Art Institute
close.
between the walls.
Okay.
Because it was in need of restoration, and then in
Okay.
the 90s, the Whitney bought it and restored it, and then, of course, she just had this major retrospective recently, and so it's been shown again. But and Bruce Conner made a movie about them when they moved it out of. You're thinking of the Fillmore apartment where when she was married to Wally Hedrick, and they lived on Fillmore in San Francisco, and she had this enormous painting that weighed several tons.
That's the one. Yeah.
That's
What
the one.
was that? Wasn't that a rose, or what was?
Yeah, that was the rose. But,
Okay,
but
that's
that
the
was
one.
just when they had to leave that apartment. That
Oh,
was,
okay, all right.
I mean,
That's-
she was still
okay,
very much alive years later when I worked with her on her retrospective. But anyway.
Sure. All right. Okay. So all right.
But anyway, because that painting's become kind of legendary.
Oh, it's a complete legend. Yeah, we were.
Yeah.
It was definitely
so,
a topic of discussion.
Roses seem to be cropping up in a lot of contemporary art. There's a show idea there somewhere, but for a group show on roses. But in any case, I was just curious whether that was entered your consciousness at all. When
I'm sure it was back there.
Back there somewhere.
But that painting had been brought up, and I think there was a lot of comparisons of that one to Rembrandt's painting of the meat, the side of beef that's kind of cut and splayed open, and then Francis Bacon's painting too. So it was definitely a topic.
Okay. All right. This obviously I can see relates back to the leprosy tales of Burma, right?
Yeah, and this is borrowed. This is Argus, and the story of Argus. I was sort of rereading it this week. Is that Hera, wife of Zeus, knew that Zeus was kind of messing around, and there was this whole order of things that were just a lot of things that weren't good about what was going on, and kind of this changing of this hierarchy of the gods. And he knew that Io, who was a nymph, was somebody that Zeus had interest in. So when Zeus sensed that Hera was coming, he turned Io into a white calf. And I've used that white calf before in other paintings. And so she came up to him and said, like, "Oh, is that a gift for me?" Knowing very well what it was all about. And he was like, "Yeah, sure, that's a gift." And so Hera had Argus, who had 100 eyes. And so Argus was left to watch over Io, so Zeus wouldn't come back and get her. So Argus always had at least one eye open all the time. I mean, probably most of the time he had all his 100 eyes looking and keeping guard. And so Zeus sent Hermes to come and dispatch of Argus. So eventually Hermes played, I think he played music and that didn't work, and then eventually he used flattery or poetry, and then that finally made Argus close the last eye, and then he severed his head. So I was trying to capturing that moment right when that happened. And Argus ended up being referenced later as a peacock. So so that was eventually his sort of like his reward, because you see on the peacock feathers there's those things that look like eyes.
So let me ask you a little bit about your process. So were you working, like the pose of that figure, did you invent that pose, or was that pose taken from something else?
It was also taken from that book, I guess. Are we still in 95? I can't, without my reading glasses. Thank you. Middle age. It was taken from that book also, so it was sort of referenced from that. Mm-hmm. And there was the Fellini film, the Satyricon, mm-hmm. had a character that was in it that they were rolling around in a wheelbarrow, mm-hmm. and it was the I'm trying to remember what they referenced it as. If anybody can help me. It was a hermaphrodite, but they called it an oracle. They called it an oracle, and I was sort of influenced by that, by mm-hmm. the Fellini film. Thank you, whoever yelled that out.
Okay, now a little bit of a shift here. Still in the 90s.
Still
okay.
In the 90s.
All right. But you've entirely new imagery, so let's talk about these.
Yeah, these two pieces are very small, and it's funny, as an artist, I think oftentimes a lot of us make art that is sort of befitting of where we can make art. And when I moved back to San Antonio, I had very small spaces that I worked in, like really, really small spaces. So much so to the point that I was, painting in my kitchen. And one of the last places I had before I actually moved into a legitimate studio was right across the street from where Liberty Bar is now, across Sheridan. I lived in a teeny tiny carriage house, and it was a one-bedroom situation that had a little loft over the bathroom where I had a mattress up there, and I would crawl down my little ladder, and I would paint. And I was painting on these objects that I made that were cut out of wood. And I would go to Home Depot. Home Depot was the best art store at the time. I would go buy pieces of MDF board and pieces of birch, plywood, and 1x4s, and I would cut these. I had a miter saw, so I would cut. And again, I was making these objects that were similar to the ones that we looked at a little while ago. So most of these paintings are about 5 by 6 inches. And so, seeing them projected really large kind of weirds me out, because they're supposed, the scale.
Keep your eyes on the monitor.
Okay. They're still bigger. Good point. Most of these are small, and the scale is meant to be intimate. Mm-hmm. And I think that, for me, the image on the left, with the cow, where this almost sort of implied veil. I mean, I think I was thinking about Michelangelo's the creation of Adam, where there's this fold and these figures that are coming out, but you can see that this thing is shot with arrows. And I was also working a lot with the image of the Saint Sebastian, who was also shot up with arrows. Yes. Mm-hmm. And the one on the right, I started painting these birds, and I still paint birds these days. I like birds. And, birds are important. I
curated a whole show on birds.
Where was my phone call?
Didn't know your work yet.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, so these birds, they're. I mean, this one started off with this bird that was. I was looking at a Dutch painting, and I'm really struggling to remember the name of the artist who did it.
Fabricius, maybe?
Maybe, yeah. That sounds familiar. That might have been it. And it was just a little finch that's perched on a little plank. And I thought, what's even worse to have a bird that's captured? The bird with a ball and chain. I mean, that's like the ultimate symbol of futility. and kind of sadness. It's just sort of like, oh, I give up. I'll just sit on this perch, but I'll try to fly. Like, ah, hell. So it's it's just this weight.
Which, of course, metaphorically can refer to all kinds of struggle and being weighted down and held back, right?